Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the Filibuster. I'm one of the hosts, Lee Hutchison, and welcome to the brand new look, all shiny, new Filibuster. The Senate floor is merged into the Filibuster, and we're now going to be an amazing kind of one-stop shop for all the hosts of the network. Don't worry, me and Matt will still be here every 2 weeks talking about Marvel, Star Trek, Star Wars, and everything in between. But on off weeks, we're going to have like an all the ramble of hosts that we've got. We've got so many amazing people spread across the new Star Trek podcast, the Star Wars podcast, Nerd Up Show, that we want to get everyone in together to be able to share some exciting topics that they're passionate about. And this week, Darren Moser, one of the hosts of the new Ceti Alpha 3 podcast, has picked this topic of hard science fiction movies. So I'm going to hand it over to him to introduce and tell us about this subject, and we're going to have a bit of fun for the next hour talking about some exciting movies that he's chosen. So Darren, welcome to the Nerd Party.
Thank you. It is great to be officially here. I did get a lovely chance to already talk with you a bit when we did our alien commentary a little bit ago on Filibuster 17. That was always fun. And yeah, so I found a good signal here on Ceti Alpha 3. I can transmit and receive. So fortunately, we can talk about movies. So for today, I wanted to talk about hard science space movies. And it's, because if we're not going to talk about something ridiculously specific, then why bother? So
yeah, what's the point of the Nerd Party?
Exactly. Nerds in their definition are nerding out over niches. It's all about the nerd niches and alliteration too. That comes into play as well.
When I saw your list of movies that you picked to discuss today, there's a few that got me particularly excited that I just had to put my name forward for this. That I've had such a long day. I got home from London first thing in the morning, went straight to work, and now here I am in my pajamas at night podcasting. But when we get through some of these movies, you'll find out why I just had to be on this episode.
Well, let's get to it. So I put about maybe 8 or so on this list. And of course, this isn't an all-inclusive list. You can add and remove as you listeners feel so inclined. But these are ones that I feel fall into this definition. And the definition only gets stronger as we progress through the years, as you will see. But I felt we had to start back in 1968 with 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mean, at that point, we hadn't even landed on the moon yet.
It's crazy to think that, isn't it? That I actually saw 2001 on the big screen just a few months ago, and it still just looks as stunning as ever. And it truly blows your mind that this was Stanley Kubrick's first trip to the moon before he filmed the moon landings a year or so later. So yeah, he really was getting some practice in before the greatest conspiracy of all time.
Well, okay, now please do not tweet me if you believe we did not land on the moon, because I will fight you. We obviously did land on the moon. There's a lot of documentation, and I don't even know why that's the thing. It doesn't even make sense. But yeah, 2001. This is a favorite of mine. Yes, it is very long. Yes, the shots are very long and drawn out. But as a piece of cinematic history, as it trying to represent what 2001 would look like for space travel and trying to get things right. I mean, there's no jet exhaust. There's no, well, there is a bad robot, but, it's built into the ship, so it's okay. But this movie did such a good job of the heart of this topic, which is trying to portray things as realistically or accurately as possible. I mean, yes, it's fiction. Yes, it's a film, but they want to transport you to this world of taking moon buses with your lunch to, Tycho Crater, because that's what you do. It's Thursday. It's not even a big deal anymore. So, but yeah, this has been a favorite of mine for many years.
Yeah, it's a totally stunning movie. I caught it actually on 70 millimeter
Ooh.
just kind of a few months ago during the film festival, and it was just a stunning print and a stunning opportunity to see a film like this the way it's meant to be seen. That I'm sure I'm the same as you, Darren. I've seen it on video so many times, DVD, Blu-ray, and the fact to see it on the big screen was just stunning, and it reminds you how ahead of its time it was. That it's people talk about, say, movies like Alien and Blade Runner making like the lived in universe, but 2001 did that first. That you walk around these ships, you see the technology, and you get the impression everything has a purpose, every button has a specific task, and it really is stunning to see that level of detail on the ship in that second part.
Oh, definitely. I mean, when we have the giant jump cut from prehistoric man all the way to, back into the far flung future. But I mean, even the shots as they're going around the disc and as they're bolted into their chairs to not fall out as it spins. I mean, it's the cinematography in this shot is so well done. And who doesn't think of HAL 9000 when you think of evil robots? Like you have to put them on your list.
And it's one of those ones ahead of its time that I always think of Hal as actually my Siri, in a way that he's just that ahead of the time, just that little red light, as it were.
That
That you could
impassionate
imagine something like
eye.
that being on your iPhone. What are you doing, Dave? And I mean, like the fact that this film is, it's 1968 it came out, and it's crazy to think that it still is as relevant as ever. That how we're dealing with technology and the fears that people have that technology is going to take over their lives, and perhaps that's kind of goes back to 2001 and that such a realistic portrayal of what could go wrong and how a computer could kick someone out of the airlock.
Exactly. Well, when I was younger and always building Legos with my friend Steven, we had a rule where if you ever heard the beautiful blue Danube, gravity turned off and our Legos would start to float, because that's what they play as they're on the shuttle heading to the moon and the pen is floating, and it's just it's so good.
And especially with sci-fi, really at the time, we kind of think of it like Star Trek specifically in the kind of 60s, where everything, everyone is able to sit around that. Or how does that work? Oh, it's the kind of the anti-gravity machine or something like that. Everything's kind of just easily answered. With 2001, it still kind of feels that it's within our lifetime. That I always think of, probably in the 60s, that people drew what it would look like to be in 2001, and you have these kind of moon shuttles, and hey Timmy, what will it be like when we're older? Oh, you can go to the moon, and back in a day. But 2001 is just that almost that realistic interpretation of what the future would be like. It's they've pulled it back from the kind of the grandiose images of kind of the 50s and 60s science fiction pulp, the Star Treks, and made it back into something realistic, that these are believable astronauts, a believable ship, that their workout is probably similar to the kind of footage that was being shown on American TV at the time of the cosmonauts going into space and getting prepared. It's that line is there in the sand.
And that's what the moon looks like. I mean, when we went there later that decade, it looks pretty convincing, for considering we had very little actual footage of the moon at the time. But well, our next pick, Lee, we're going to jump 30 years forward, and I just want to put this up front. This list is going to get worse before it gets better. But bear with us, because we're going to jump to 1998 Armageddon, Michael Bay. Okay, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Darren, hard science, a bunch of oil drillers trained to be astronauts, because that's easier than training astronauts to be oil drillers, rocketing around the moon. Yeah, okay, I can't even describe the entire movie. It's so implausible, but I did want to put it on the list because it does have space stations. It does have a modified super rocket shuttle. It has also that, what's the word, that spirit of exploration and adventure and space, which I always enjoy, and it's just a fun ride. I mean, the armadillo. I didn't even want to start on what the heck that thing looks like, but I think I had to keep this in, even though it is the stretchiest of this topic we're going for.
I was 11 when this movie came out, and my dad actually worked offshore on a oil rig at the time, and to switch on a movie to see people from an oil rig working in space made me believe that my dad could go to space and drill on a ship on an asteroid. Unrealistic somewhat. Where I kind of grew up was kind of part of the big oil trade, that most people's dads or uncles or relatives worked offshore in these oil rigs, and I could just imagine, family, friends, and everyone just rocketing off into space to save the day. It's not the most realistic image in the world.
No, but that's fun that you have that personal connection with that half of the movie, but I mean it's a well acted movie. I like Billy Bob Thornton. I think is really well done. I mean, it's just one of those big ensemble casts, kind of before big ensemble cast kind of was a thing, and it's just a lot of fun.
I always remember the period of '98 where it was like Armageddon or Deep Impact, Bugs or Ants' Life. It seemed to be that was the summer of the matching movies.
Exactly, I remember that. Which probably Deep Impact was a little more on the scientific side, but Armageddon is just, it went all big. It went big or went home. And so you have to give it that.
Even down to that, I think Armageddon's more remembered these days, not necessarily for the science or the movie, but the theme song itself, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. Yes. It's probably been played at so many weddings since.
It was one long music video. Really, that's what the movie was. So if we take it like that. Well, stepping forward 2 years, we get to 2000 and Space Cowboys. Okay, this is another guilty pleasure of mine. Again, it's easier to train really old ex-astronauts to be astronauts versus training new astronauts to... Anyway, that part breaks down, but it's a lot of fun. It's a very, old, right stuff kind of feel. Well cast. I mean, Clint Eastwood not only directs this, but is the lead. You got Tommy Lee Jones. And they go up in to confront the really scary satellite. That satellite was scary. It freaked me out. But this again a guilty pleasure and a lot of fun. I mean, you have a guy with glasses on in space. I mean, that you can't top that.
Yeah, this is a film that I've only ever seen once, and I can barely remember a thing about it. I actually saw it. I think I was coming back from America on a long-haul flight, and this was one of the movies, and I was quite excited to see this one, because I was a big space geek as a kid. I was like, I can finally watch Space Cowboys. I think I watched 10 minutes of it, and through no fault of the film, I think my sleeping pills kicked in, and I just fell asleep on the plane all the way home. So to this day, I have never seen the ending of Space Cowboys.
Well, that's okay. That you have a lot of movies you need to watch, Lee, and it's okay to put Space Cowboy lower on that list. I do not fault you for that, but
this will be one of the films I'll be on the new podcast with Sean, Missing Frames, talking about how I've not seen Space Cowboys. I'm sure we'll get that one in the books.
Oh, there you go. Well, okay, now we come to, I think, the reason not maybe we're all here, but definitely you're all here. 2009. Okay, this is the later half of the list where it actually fits the definition of hard science, really going into a technical level of believability. And we have Moon, directed by Duncan Jones, and I'll just let you start off on that, Lee.
I love Moon. It was like yesterday I got this message. Someone's pulled out. I need someone to fill in. And I looked at the list. I was like, 2001, Amazing, Armageddon, Space Cowboys. Oh, I'm sure you'll find someone. Moon. Well, Darren, I mean, I'm back home tomorrow. I'll meet up with you. We'll do this. Any chance to talk about Moon? Anyone that's listened to my kind of previous podcast talking about Moon with Matt Hansen knows how much Moon means. And not long after the release of that podcast, we actually it was promoted at a hard science event, promoting, and we got it kind of plugged at the end. And if you like this movie event, you can check out Moon. I've been lucky where I live to be see several screenings of Moon out with kind of the European premiere and film release. It was part of a film philosophy day talking about is cloning an ethical situation to do on the moon, and then I saw it earlier this year at kind of a hard science event where the film was screened, and then they spoke about the moon and is the movie realistically possible, sending energy from the moon, and they even brought moon rocks along. So, it was a pretty unique film event. So for me, I think the science of moon is incredibly realistic, and it's kind of that same thing as 2001, that the use of kind of real life sets, intimate environments, touchable technology that serves a purpose, creates a kind of atmosphere already where you believe this is a realistic sci-fi movie. It's not got that kind of CGI effect where you think, oh, this is a kind of animated version of science. I think the idea of sending energy from the moon to Earth is quite fascinating, that we've signed the Paris Accords this week to kind of tackle climate change. So the idea that countries are going to have to come together and look at new ways to, boost renewables, fossil fuels aren't always going to be the way. Coal is a hot topic issue in America just now, the fact that it's kind of coming to its end. So the idea that we might have to go to the moon to get energy is not too unrealistic, I don't think.
No, and this movie is just firing on all cylinders. I mean, it's stellarly acted, and its use of miniatures for like the rover and the exterior shots, and they really shine on par. And it was made for a fairly small budget, I believe, but the story, you really need to see this movie. It needs to be in any space lover's collection because it is so well done. And it's got, the hints of science fiction, like you said, with the cloning and some things we don't have yet. But besides that, this scenario could actually happen today. Like, the technology's really not that far off. I mean, the expense of getting there and doing all of that is cost prohibitive, which is why we're not mining the moon right now. But I could definitely see an L3, Lunar Industries in the future. I also like how it has the company kind of alien-esque.
Yeah, it's that kind of trait, isn't it? Sci-fi movies always have to have the company that always knows best and has always got some sort of ulterior motive. I think the cloning aspect is definitely going to be a part that kind of in the few years' time that I think we will be kind of looking at kind of human cloning in a certain way, that I think there's definitely steps towards something along those lines when we look at kind of what kind of cloning's been going on and what can go on. And I think the idea that of sending clones to the moon is very realistic, that we speak about kind of, well, you can't have a certain mission to kind of Mars or the moon because it costs so much to train one astronaut. So the fact that you only need to train one and transfer the memories into another seems very realistic, and especially in this kind of frugal environment where you've got it that, okay, we've got all these, this is how much it's going to cost to train all these astronauts. We are just going to spend the money on developing clones, and you can have a lifetime of trained astronauts, and all you need to do is train it once. And when you see some of the kind of reaction these days where people look at the money being spent at NASA and think, why should we spend that money when realistically we could spend it on education, poverty? Like, sometimes a justification like this might be needed to make the public accept money going into space funding, I think.
Well, and I mean, every dollar you spend in space, you reap so much benefits. I mean, we're still riding the technological wave from the Apollo program and from that era. So it is definitely, at least in my vote, worth the investment. But that's a good point. I mean, you think of, let's say you have a colony on Mars that just got there, and you're having new kids and you're starting an actual colony. You can't have a kid that just sits around. Everyone has to learn, because you're basically always running against the clock of your older generation dying and losing that knowledge, and now you're stuck. So everyone's got to pull their weight and do their part, especially with such a small population. So, I mean, a population of one plus, was it Gertie, the robot
Gertie, yeah.
AI, which Kevin Spacey
and
does so well.
That's another realistic thing, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's another realistic aspect as well, that we look at kind of artificial intelligence, we say we've got 2001, it's just this kind of red light. And with so much sci-fi, we've got these kind of artificial intelligence which looks human, or we've got computer systems that are in charge of everything. I always think Gertie kind of looks like a kind of kitchen sink, big microwave that's just lumbering around. And I think that, and it's how it interacts with humans and that kind of just the smiley face.
Right, the emoji
It's really quite
con.
realistic. Yeah, because once again, it's almost that kind of emoji-con kicked in before we kind of got it on the iPhones, where we could switch it on now and we can pick that smiley face, the frowning face, the monkey face. It's like Moon just kind of just got in there ahead of that kind of trend, and any kind of intelligence like that on a base, I could imagine it just being this kind of clunky thing just kicking around. So I think they've really grounded that element in realistic science.
They do, and it's an artificial intelligence, but it doesn't feel like it needs to be a one-to-one person level intelligence. It obviously has a program. It obviously has its goal is to, interact with Sam and facilitate the mission. But it's a notch above what we have now, but it's not like, well, that's obviously just a person reading lines. Like, it feels like a program, which is a good balance to hit. And yeah, with the emotions, they add context. I mean, how many times do we send messages and text to each other? And if we could just add a little sarcastic symbol or serious symbol, like that would make it so much clearer on what we're trying to say. So it makes sense that an AI would have a screen like that says, I'm saying this word to you, but I'm also sad. And that gives you more context in what it's saying.
And I think as well with the clones as well, that the fact that they've only got a certain lifespan is kind of, once again, quite realistic. That how do you keep up these kind of, you get a clone and you've got it immediately, it's like 35 years old. How do you keep that going up kind of forever? That if you've got a realistic 3-year lifespan and that you can build a kind of plan around that okay, we've got this clone for 3 years, so we've got this 3-year cycle that we can take full advantage of it, then it kind of comes to its end and we bring another one in, as opposed to kind of we've got a clone and now it's going to live happily ever after. I think the time frame shows, like, it keeps it kind of close to us, that it's not perfect, it's not a refined science at this stage, it's still something that's in development, and it keeps it realistic and like it's made by kind of flawed humans of the day, not just this perfect futuristic kind of mankind where they've got everything sorted.
Well, yeah, and the company, I mean, in the company's view, like L3 Industries, he's property, he's a component of this system. I mean, I don't believe they view him as human. We programmed it and set it up so that you believe you're human and you will do what we need and we will get our resources. But, they just loaded the clip of clones when they started. And once that runs out, they'll just load up another one and just continue it on. So it's a very good film, very deep and beautifully made and to watch as well.
Yeah, and the score is fantastic as well, and I'm really looking forward to, I think it's kind of maybe the end of next year, Mute, which is kind of a semi-sequel to Moon, where it's going to be based in modern-day Berlin.
I heard about
very
that,
little's
yes.
known about it. Yeah, very little's known about it, but I remember as far back as 2009, Duncan Jones was teasing this kind of movie, and thankfully the funding's gone through and it'll get a limited film release and then be available on Netflix.
Oh, that's perfect. That's a great way to do it nowadays. And I mean, TV and distribution has changed so much since '09 already, so I'm glad these opportunities are available. Well, next we get to the the unofficial trilogy powerhouse of 2013, 14, 15, Gravity, Interstellar, and The Martian, and where these are just firing on all cylinders in this topic of hard science. So Gravity, Alfonso Cuarón. I mean, I don't know if you've seen any of the behind the scenes on what went into making Gravity, Lee, but it's amazing. Did you say you had or hadn't?
I have, yeah.
With the light cube, they built like this 3-dimensional cube around Sandra Bullock, and they had pre-resed out exactly where the camera would be and which angle and where the Earth would be and where the station would be. So all these little lights properly showed the light reflecting off of her as they filmed it to be added later. And it's just, I mean, that just blows my mind, because that's like taking it to the 10th level just to get a drop-in CGI blue screen shot. But it was so much more. And for not only that, but the story and the fact that it drops you, mid scene, you're right in the middle of it. It all starts to happen. And except for a few outliers in space fact, it's pretty factual in what's going on.
Yeah, it's one of these films that I was really quite excited going into this movie, and it's one I've seen a couple times now, and it's never really sort of clicked with me. I think it's the fact I'm not the biggest Sandra Bullock fan, and I think like I've become a bit frustrated with the character, and I think some of the imagery is a bit kind of, on the nose. I think on a technical level, it's absolutely stunning and incredible, and it's one of those amazing adverts for IMAX. I think what I find quite fascinating about it is the idea that we see it sometimes, especially in science fiction, that you go into orbit and you've just got this one satellite, or you see something go into orbit and there's no satellites or space stations or anything around. And I think the idea of gravity showing almost space as a playground in a way, that you've got the American station, there's the Russian station, the Chinese station.
They are all not that close to each other, but for the point of plot, we will accept that.
Yeah, and I like the idea that of kind of the interactions between the two, that it's almost that idea that of how each space station can affect the other, and how you can the idea that she can travel to the Russian space station, and how the inside and interior is completely different to the others, but yet there's that kind of universal technology between the three stations that is similar, but there's just those minute details between the stations. I find that quite fascinating, and I'd love to be able to just go into those sets and just pull them apart, look at them. I think it's a stunning piece of production work. While I may not enjoy the movie as such, I think as a piece of filmmaking, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean everyone uses the Soyuz crafts to get up and down. They're so reliable. They've launched so many times, and they've done it safely so many times. So all astronauts have to know Russian to operate them. It's a base level for going to the ISS. But yeah, from its use of, the sound design is on point, because you don't have the, pew pew swoosh sound. Like, no, you just hear inside her helmet breathing. I mean, yes, it's accented with music, but it stays true to the no sound in space, which makes it even more hyper real. And pretty much in space, everything is stacked against you. Like, the fact that she actually survives is very, very, like, she has to work for it, because everything outside wants to kill you in space. It's very difficult to live in.
I always remember when I watched this for the first time, I nearly just flipped a brick. I'm sure that most people have when they watch the film, that moment we think George Clooney's come back from the dead, and he's just like opens the door, and I was just at a moment going, are you kidding me? This film is really stakes its integrity on being this realistic, hard sci-fi movie, and then we've just got George Clooney's just kicking into the space station, and then I was like, oh, thank God he's fake.
Right? It's a hallucination, because it's like, yeah, I'm like, wait a minute, you just completely depressurized for 2 seconds. I mean, no, you would be dead. It would not. But yeah, no, and she goes through the ringer, but she makes it. Well, then that set off, and again, it's not like that. I mean, sure, it had a slight influence on the next ones in this series, but I mean, you have to think these are in production for years. So the fact that we got these 3 years in a row is incredible. We get Interstellar with Christopher Nolan, and this, from the Rangers that kind of have a little bit of a shuttle look, to the AI, TARS and Case and Kip, all the different the bricks, the floating bricks, which I love. Those are so well done. Plus the overall, I mean, I don't know, this one, it's kind of got the depressing storyline with the whole, the blight and everything's dying, and we're all here in the dirt, and that part makes it a little bit less of a frequent watch for me. But I do like its science concept. I love how it deals with relativity around the planet that's really close to the Big Bertha black hole, and where an hour on the planet equals 7 in Earth. Like, it deals with relativity. I haven't seen a movie deal with time relativity since the original Planet of the Apes, where that's why they're so far in the future, because they've gone so fast, which actually makes sense. But no one deals with time relativity in space movies, really.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating. Me and you are as big a Star Trek fans as anyone, and like the idea of relativity, like it's something any science geek like us has grown up thinking it's just this amazing concept that an hour on Earth can mean like 7 years elsewhere. It's just a concept that just blows your mind, and it's something that's barely ever been represented in cinema. Sometimes we're just happy to get no sound in space, so to get something on this level is just mind blowing. I was really lucky a few years ago. Just last year actually. I went to see Interstellar live in London, where Hans Zimmer performed the score to the movie.
Oh, the
and
score!
Before the film
Oh my
started,
gosh.
it was just I was so lucky to see Christopher Nolan, Kip Thorne, Dr. Brian Cox, and Stephen Hawking do like a question and answer amongst themselves, talking about the science of Interstellar and the concepts behind it that was dealing with. And you know, you're so used to seeing Stephen Hawking and hearing that famous voice on TV, but then to be in a room hearing it talk, it was just unbelievable. So to hear those geniuses talking about the science, and people, they were kind of discussing what have been argued as plot holes in the movie and explaining relativity, it was just a special experience. And for me, I think, and we touched upon this earlier on, that we're still reaping the benefits of those early missions, those early trips to Mars. And I think that's kind of really well summed up in the scene where he talks about the MRI scanner and all these different things that we take for granted, that just because it doesn't involve going to space doesn't mean this is a technology that's not got rooted in that kind of exploration, that investment into the sciences, that investment into how can we go beyond the stars. And one of my favorite moments in that movie is, you know, we used to be explorers, but now we're here in the dirt. And that's a thing I actually really love, because I remembered being a kid and thinking like movies like Apollo 13, all these space movies were 10 a penny, and I dreamed that, oh wow, I'd love to be an astronaut. Even coming out of Apollo 13, I was like, I want to be an astronaut. And it made you want to dream bigger as a kid. Now I look at kind of kids these days, and there's no kind of sciencey movies that I would think would truly inspire young kids to want to be astronauts, to dream about going into space and in the stars, not in a Star Wars way, but in a scientific way. And I think that's something we've lost with the lack of kind of pushing out into the stars, even back to the moon. And I think Interstellar is a fantastic advert for what it was like for my generation when we were younger, and for that kind of older generation that was caught up in the moon race, that was there when we were watching the moon landings. And I think it's a great advert for investing in science.
Oh man, there's so much to unpack from that. Yeah, just, I mean, the benefits we're receiving. I mean, do you like using GPS, Lee? Because I like using GPS, because I'm pretty sure GPS is in space, but the S stands for satellite. But yeah, there's so much benefit we're reaping. And in Interstellar, I love again, it's just edge technology that's a little past what we have, but it totally makes sense. Like the sleep chambers that they hibernate, I mean, that makes sense on these long trips, which we also saw in 2001, A Space Odyssey. But the score, yeah, the fact that you got to listen to it live, I love. From the I think my favorite has to be the not orchestra, but organ based piece from when they're redocking to the damaged ship, and it's so tense. It's so tense, but it's so good, and
I'll tell you, like, that scene when they were performing it, because they actually had the organ player from the movie attended, and the Albert Hall is just a stunning venue. Like, the sound just travels so well, and that kind of music build up's about 14 minutes. It kind of
it's a long piece,
the whole scene. And then spontaneously, when that kind of track ended with them like safely docking, this whole like 20,000 people just started applauding. Just that it was, you know, spontaneous, this reaction to that specific score. It was just unbelievable. It was a truly special night in every respect.
Yeah, I've seen videos of organ players playing that piece. I mean, just to play the organ is incredible amount of skill, but to play a piece like that, where you're basically playing an entire orchestra in one instrument, it feels like. But no, I totally agree with you. I want to see more films like these, like this list, that are inspiring the next generation and are encouraging them. I'm actually going to be launching another small podcast later this month that focuses specifically on my love of space exploration and that hope for the future, because I can't stop talking about it. I can't stop encouraging people about it, because I feel it's so important. And you may not agree, it may not be top on your list of budgetary items, but I feel for every amount we push into it, we are going to get such a benefit. Well, that leads us out.
It brings people together as well.
It does. It does bring people together, because, ever since 1968, when we left Earth orbit, went around the moon in Apollo 8, there was, in that view back on the planet, the whole planet in one shot. I mean, that's where we are. It's all of us right there. Everyone's in that shot, and we have to do our best to be good stewards as we can. But moving on to our last pick, and I'm glad you did bring up Apollo 13, because it wasn't on my list because it's more documentary-esque, real, like this actually happened, whereas everything else on this list is, a piece of fiction. We didn't actually go in Interstellar. We didn't. That doesn't exist. But I'm glad you mentioned it, because that the level of detail and realism that was in that movie was also just unparalleled. So well made.
I've actually got a film I'd love to put on the end of this list, if you don't mind, as well. I'll keep that one as a wee surprise.
We have a surprise, but before that we have The Martian, last year, 2015, Ridley Scott. So we finally get to Mars, and we're doing orbit rendezvous and the book. I devoured the book, The Martian. I could not put it down. It was so good. This mission log style, and which fit really well with his little GoPro movies, and you're rooting for him. And again, you want to talk about having a cause to rally people around. I mean, the reason we had the space race was because it was a race. I mean, that's just America. We need someone to edge us on, just like Apple and Microsoft, just like all these other companies. If you have not antagonist, but a race partner, you're going to do better. And in The Martian, that bring him home was the driving force in NASA's ridiculous large facility, which there's no way it would actually have. But yeah, this was just a great movie, really fun. Again, like most of these movies, tiny points of would not actually happen, but for the most part, it really gets it right. It feels and it's well done. I mean, we keep needing to save this man. He just keeps getting in trouble. But so if he's ever put in, if Matt Damon's ever put in a future space movie, we'll just be like, okay, we got to rescue him again. It's just.
Yeah, I think there was an article just a few months ago where it was focused on how much money the American government has spent to save
Saving
Matt Damon.
Private Ryan,
crazy.
Interstellar, The Martian, the list goes on.
I think it's a really good movie. I've not seen the extended cut that recently came out lately, but what I liked most about it was the human ingenuity. That how does a smart person in the room react? That we're kind of used to with a lot of sci-fi, that they kind of get by in an adventurous way, or they technobabble their way out. I'm looking at you, Star Trek. With something like The Martian, this is someone that's using their wit and their will to survive mentally, physically, and it's using resources. That's something we rarely see in kind of science fiction, is using real life resources, whether it's human feces to create potatoes. It's things like that make it realistic, where you kind of look at that and think, of course that's what you would use. And it's showing how a good education and science can really help you in all these sorts of situations. That is it so unrealistic that perhaps in several centuries we might be kind of in barren situations, that the earth might be in a terrible state, and it's going to be people, it's not always the strongest that survive, but it'll be the smartest that survive. that can use their resources, can use their intelligence to make use of what's left and what's around us and to get through. And I think it's a fantastic advert for studying science. It's a film, I think, is an incredible advert to studying that as a degree, to studying biology, to studying how we can do better.
Well, and that really also, it shows props to the astronaut corps, because that's how astronauts are trained. I mean, they have their specialties, but they also need to know pretty much how most components of the ship work. How, I mean, yes, it's a team effort, definitely, but it shows how he needs to do repairs. He needs to fix things and figure out the systems. And I like the fact that the majority of the movie, he's cut off. He cannot communicate with NASA, with home. And they don't even know he's alive for a good portion of it. And it's really well done. Wonderful book. My favorite part of the book, or one of it, was, which they had this in the movie, but the reveal is different just from reading versus seeing, is when the airlock decompresses and throws them out. But in the book, they have these little tiny paragraphs that appear a couple chapters before, where it's like, 3 years ago on this day, cloth mesh section J12 was checked and had this slight imperfection at this area. And that's it. And I'm like, what the heck? Why are we talking about this random piece of the HAB? And then they talked about it later, like 2 chapters later. They're like, this was installed by technician, whatever. And if he had done this check, he would have noticed that the slight abrasion was here, and basically, and then it clicked in my head. I'm like, oh, something's bad's going to happen, because why would we be talking about this? And it just kept building and building, and to that moment where it's like, well, in a normal situation, they use the airlocks, both consistently, but Mark only used the left one because it was where the ship was parked. And every time he opened and closed the door, and then it basically led to the decompression. And I just love that literary use of tension, because I'm like, I don't quite know why we're talking about this random piece of the ship, but it's going to be important. And then it had a big payoff.
And I think it's one of those things that we spoke about, that science as well can bring nations together as well, that we're in modern times, the escalations between kind of nations, and once again showing that shooting towards the stars can bring a lot of people together, that working together for the common good. And I think that we can talk about the hard science, but so many of these movies and the science fiction we grew up with really has been about the fact that science and space and science brings people together for common good, that there's so much, the International Space Station is an incredible achievement, and the fact that it's brought so many nations together, I think that that's the true kind of Star Trek, the space that we should all kind of aim towards. That we recently had Tim Peake come back to the UK, and the guy's gone around like a tour of the country, and it's been selling out concert halls, venues, people that have wanted to see this guy and hear about his stories in space. And there's such an appetite for those real life heroes, and it truly is a future to strive towards.
Oh, it is. It definitely is. Okay, so Lee, what are you adding to this list?
I'm going to add to this. I don't know if you've seen this movie. It's some of the science is slightly dubious, but once again, it's grounded in some sort of realism, and that's Danny Boyle's Sunshine.
Yes, Sunshine. That is a great one. The heat shield, to the way that I love how the ship is designed. I love how it's the second ship, because the first one didn't quite succeed. Yes, dropping a bunch of fissionable material into the sun is going to do jack squat, but if we look past that, I love how they all have little tags on them that are actually how they like push to talk with their AI computer. You had Human Torch before he was Human Torch, and they all kind of go space crazy because of the sun. And Sunshine, it definitely belongs on this list. It's a good halfway between Moon and Gravity, Interstellar, such. So that I would definitely include it.
Yeah, and I think it's another one of those ones again where it's once again about kind of nations coming together to save the planet, pooling their resources and things like the kind of the use of that we see again with kind of the Martian, like having a botany, kind of space department. We've got flowers, we're growing things, they're growing their own atmosphere, and I think things like that are really kind of quite fascinating. And the idea of what space can do to people mentally, the damage it can do, that we look up into the sky and think, oh, the sun, it's so close, but the journey it would take to get to the sun and the damage it can do to us, perhaps mentally and physically, is still something to be learned. And I think that the sun, in terms of its use in science fiction movies, is so hugely overlooked, that we've gone to the moon so many times, we've gone to Mars so many times, yet the sun is this thing that we take for granted in our own sky, and that we've barely ever covered about a movie about what it would be like to travel to the sun. And I think Sunshine really is an interesting example of the sun.
It is, which is, it's so funny. I've been rewatching, or actually watching for the first time, the old 1960s Thunderbirds, and there's an episode called Sun Probe where, because it's in the semi-future, and they sent this rocket with a crew of 3 to send a little probe down and scoop up some material of the sun, and unfortunately their retros don't fire, so Thunderbirds 3's got to zip over there and save them. And it's, again, it's it made me think of when you brought up Sunshine, and it's but yeah, it's we take the sun for granted. It's right there, and fortunately it's not going to grow cold in the next decade or whatever. It will expand into a red giant billions of years from now and consume the entire inner planets. But that we will not be around for. Maybe in Doctor Who, but not anything we will see.
On that exciting note, I think that brings us to the end of our show.
I think we got in Thunderbirds and Doctor Who, so we're all set.
Absolutely. There has already been talks about doing a Thunderbirds episode, so I'm sure there'll be some listeners out there that'll be eager to hear that one. So thank you so much for this, Darren. It was a total pleasure to come join you today.
Oh, thank you. It was a lot of fun. Again, you can listen to me on our new show, Ceti Alpha 3, which is premiering this Friday, the 11th, I believe, with my co-host Daniel Prue and Philip Gilfus, as we talk all of Star Trek, not just The Next Generation, but all of that franchise we love. And again, you can find out about my occupation of Southern California as a stormtrooper on my website, drsci-fi.com, or chat with me about your favorite hard science movie on Twitter under username Dr. Sci-Fi, DRSCIFI.
Yeah, and you can find me on the Filibuster. Me and Matt will be back next week. I'm not too sure what subject we'll be discussing, but I'm sure it'll be an exciting one. And you can find me on Twitter at Lee_Nostromo. And yeah, please leave us a review on iTunes. It really is greatly appreciated, especially now that we've got this exciting new rebrand, that we're no longer the Senate Floor, we're now the Filibuster. So all your kind of reviews always kind of bring a wee smile to everyone here at the team, and it really does mean a lot. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. And as I say, Filibuster is going to be a great place in the kind of coming weeks and months for all the hosts of the network, all 13, to come together and talk about subjects like the hard science, like Darren's brought today, Thunderbirds in the future. There's so many amazing ideas that are going on behind the scenes, so hopefully you can join us for each and every week. And that'll be everything for today, so that's us signing off. Please let us know your favourite hard sci-fi movie and get in touch. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Lee. Live long and prosper.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.